The radar operator's hands trembled as he stared at the screen. It was August 14, 1968. Dawn was breaking over the Caribbean, painting the Cuban coastline in shades of copper and ash. The air defense station at San Antonio de los Baños had been monitoring the skies since midnight. Routine surveillance, nothing unusual. Soviet advisors had trained the Cubans well. Every aircraft, every blip, every anomaly was logged and reported. But at 5:47 local time, something impossible happened. The radar screens went dark. Not flickering. Not malfunctioning. Dark. As if someone had reached into the electromagnetic spectrum itself and carved out a hole in reality. 12 minutes of absolute silence. When the systems came back online at 5:59, the operators ran diagnostics. Everything checked out. Equipment functioning normally. No storm interference. No technical fault. They reported it as a brief electrical anomaly and moved on with their shift. It wasn't until 3 hours later that someone noticed the MiG-21 was missing. The KGB called it sabotage. The Cubans called it treason. CIA officers in Miami called it brilliant. But in the classified archives of Langley, Virginia, stamped across a folder marked Operation Eagle Feather, eyes only, there was only one word written in red ink. This is the story of how American intelligence stole one of the Soviet Union's most advanced fighter jets from an island fortress 90 miles from U.S. shores. A mission so audacious that even today, key details remain sealed in classified vaults. The year is 1968, and the world is holding its breath. Vietnam is hemorrhaging American lives at a rate of 300 per week. The Tet Offensive has shattered illusions of a quick victory. In Prague, Soviet tanks are about to crush the Czech uprising. The nuclear arsenals of two superpowers could end civilization in 30 minutes. And in the skies above these tensions, a new predator has emerged. The Mikoyan-Gurevich MiG-21. Soviet pilots call it fishbed. NATO strategists call it a nightmare. With a top speed exceeding Mach 2, a service ceiling of 19,000 meters, and equipped with the K-13 infrared missile system, the MiG-21 represents a quantum leap in Soviet air superiority. In the skies over North Vietnam, it's shooting down American F-4 Phantoms with alarming regularity. U.S. Air Force pilots return from missions with stories that don't make sense. The MiG appears on radar, then vanishes. It locks onto targets the Americans can't see. Its acceleration defies the physics American engineers thought they understood. At Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, analysts are desperate. They have photographs, gun camera footage, intelligence reports from defectors, but they don't have the actual aircraft. They don't know what's inside the fuselage, what frequencies the radar uses, how the targeting computer processes information. They're fighting a ghost. On March 3, 1968, a man walks into the U.S. interest section in Mexico City. His name is redacted in every declassified document. Let's call him Mateo. Mateo is a Cuban Air Force mechanic, 34 years old, with grease-stained hands and the haunted eyes of someone who stopped believing in revolution. He's been working at San Antonio de los Baños airfield, Cuba's largest military aviation complex, for 6 years. He serviced Soviet bombers, maintained Cuban trainers, and for the past 8 months he's been part of the ground crew for something special. A MiG-21 PFM. Serial number 4625. Delivered directly from the Soviet factory in Gorky, flown to Cuba by a Soviet pilot, and stationed in a reinforced hangar under 24-hour guard. But Mateo tells the CIA case officer something unexpected. The guards rotate every 12 hours. There's a 30-minute gap during shift change when only one man watches the hangar entrance. And the perimeter cameras? Half of them don't work. Castro's government can't afford replacement parts. The case officer, a veteran of the Bay of Pigs, skeptical of walk-ins, asks the obvious question. Why would the Soviets leave their most advanced fighter jet in a poorly guarded hangar in Cuba? Mateo smiles grimly. Because they're teaching Cuban pilots to fly it. But the training program is a disaster. 3 crashes in 6 months. The Soviets are furious, but they can't pull the jet without admitting their pilots failed. So it sits there, waiting. The officer sends an encrypted cable to Langley that same afternoon. 10 days later, a KH-8 reconnaissance satellite passes over western Cuba at an altitude of 150 kilometers. The images, developed in a CIA photo laboratory, are stunning in their clarity. Building 7 at San Antonio airfield. Reinforced blast doors. And visible through an open maintenance bay, the distinctive delta wing silhouette of a MiG-21. The briefing room at CIA headquarters goes silent. Deputy Director of Plans Thomas Karamessines leans forward. studying the grainy photograph under a magnifying lamp. He's a Greek immigrant who worked his way up from wartime OSS operations, a man who's orchestrated coups and destabilizations across 3 continents. He's seen impossible operations succeed and certain victories collapse. But this is different. Gentlemen, he says quietly, if we could get our hands on that aircraft, actually fly it, take it apart, understand its systems, we'd have a blueprint for Soviet air doctrine for the next decade. We'd know how to counter it, how to beat it. An Air Force liaison officer interjects. Sir, with respect, the thing weighs 8 tons empty. It's got a wingspan of 23 feet. How exactly do you propose we smuggle it out of Cuba? Karamessines doesn't answer immediately. He's already running calculations, probabilities, logistics. Finally, we don't smuggle it out. We make it disappear. And we do it in a way that makes Havana and Moscow spend months arguing about who's to blame. The operation is given a code name the same day, Eagle Feather. The authorization to proceed comes directly from the Director of Central Intelligence. Congressional oversight? Non-existent. State Department consultation? Bypassed. The White House is briefed in the most general terms, technical intelligence acquisition in the Caribbean theater. Because if this operation fails, if American personnel are captured on Cuban soil trying to steal a Soviet jet, it could trigger an international crisis that makes the Bay of Pigs look like a diplomatic misunderstanding. But if it succeeds? The Cold War's balance of power shifts overnight. Room 4C47 in the CIA's original headquarters building becomes the nerve center for the operation. 7 people operating under need-to-know compartmentalization so strict that some of them never learn each other's real names. There's the logistics coordinator, a former Marine quartermaster who once smuggled a disassembled helicopter out of East Berlin. There's the technical analyst from Wright-Patterson, a woman who can identify aircraft components from radar cross-sections. There's a psychological operations specialist who spent 3 years running deception campaigns in Laos. And there's a Cuban-American case officer we'll call Ricardo, a Bay of Pigs veteran with contacts throughout the exile community and a personal hatred of Castro that's both useful and dangerous. Their mission parameters are insane. Infiltrate the most heavily surveilled island in the Western Hemisphere. Access a military airfield under Soviet-Cuban joint control. Dismantle or transport an 8-ton fighter jet. Exfiltrate without triggering Cuba's integrated air defense network. Leave no evidence of American involvement. The timeline? 6 weeks. After that, Cuban pilots will begin solo flights in the MiG-21, and the security posture will tighten irreversibly. The first layer of deception is constructed 1,200 miles away in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. The CIA establishes a shell company, Caribbean Agricultural Relief Services Limited. On paper, it's a non-profit coordinating food shipments to rural Haiti and the Dominican Republic. In reality, it's a front for acquiring a very specific aircraft, a C-130 Hercules cargo plane, purchased from a military surplus broker and registered under Panamanian flags of convenience. The plane is repainted in civilian livery. Humanitarian aid logos are stenciled on the fuselage. Legitimate cargo manifests are filed with aviation authorities. For 3 weeks, the C-130 makes genuine relief flights, establishing a pattern of legitimate activity that will camouflage what comes next. Meanwhile, Ricardo is meeting with Mateo in a safe house in Kingston, Jamaica. Mateo's motivation is complex. He's not doing this for money, though the CIA offers $50,000, enough to resettle his family in Florida. He's doing it because the revolution he once believed in has devoured his friends, imprisoned his brother for counter-revolutionary thoughts, and left him maintaining Soviet war machines while Cuban children go hungry. But agreeing to help the Americans means he can never go home. It means his extended family will face interrogation. It might mean his own death if the operation fails. Ricardo watches the mechanic's hands shake as he signs the operational agreement. Once you're inside that hangar, Ricardo says, there's no extraction if something goes wrong. If the Cubans catch you, we'll deny everything. You understand? Mateo nods slowly. I stopped being afraid a long time ago. The technical challenge is staggering. A MiG-21 cannot be flown out. Cuban radar would detect any unauthorized takeoff within seconds. It cannot be driven out. There's only one road from San Antonio airfield to the coast, and it passes through 3 military checkpoints. The solution comes from the technical analyst, during a 2 a.m. brainstorming session fueled by coffee and desperation. We don't need the whole plane. We need the components the Soviets can't replace. The radar system. The fire control computer. The weapon guidance hardware. The engine's variable geometry intake mechanism. If we extract those systems and leave behind a gutted shell, it'll look like systematic sabotage rather than theft. The logistics coordinator nods slowly, sketching on a map. But we still have to get the components off the island. 30, maybe 40 crates of electronics and engine parts, each one screaming military hardware to any customs inspector. The PSYOPs specialist has the answer. We don't hide what it is, we hide what it means. The plan that emerges is audacious in its simplicity. The disassembled MiG-21 components will be packaged as refurbished medical diagnostic equipment, X-ray machines, CT scanner components, radiotherapy parts. The CIA contracts a machine shop in Panama to fabricate dozens of convincing outer casings. The actual Soviet avionics and engine components are nested inside, surrounded by lead shielding that will defeat X-ray inspection. The cargo manifest lists the destination as Port-au-Prince General Hospital, donated equipment from International Medical Relief. If Cuban Customs inspects the crates, they'll see exactly what the paperwork says: obsolete medical machinery bound for Haiti. Unless they completely disassemble every crate, a process that would take days and require specialized tools, the deception will hold. But the most crucial element is timing. The operation must coincide with the Caribbean storm system. Specifically, the kind of intense weather that disrupts radar coverage and grounds Cuban Air Force patrols. The team begins monitoring meteorological forecasts obsessively, waiting for nature to provide a window of electronic blindness. On August 11, 1968, the National Hurricane Center issues a tropical storm warning for the Central Caribbean. The operation is greenlit for August 14. 72 hours to pull off the impossible. The C-130 Hercules takes off from a dirt airstrip in Jamaica at 11 p.m. on August 13. Officially, it's carrying emergency hurricane relief supplies to Port-au-Prince. Actually, it's carrying a 6-person team, 3 CIA operatives, 2 contract aircraft technicians with Soviet aviation experience, and Mateo, the man who's about to commit what Havana will call the greatest treason in Cuban history. The flight path takes them uncomfortably close to Cuban airspace. Through the cockpit window, they can see the lights of Havana glittering on the northern horizon, so close yet impossibly far. At 2:30 a.m., the plane makes an unscheduled landing at a private airstrip on the northern coast of Haiti, 180 miles from Cuba. Too far for Cuban radar to track clearly, but close enough for the next phase. A fishing trawler, actually a CIA maritime asset, is waiting at a coastal marina. The team transfers to the boat under cover of darkness. They're dressed as commercial fishermen. Their equipment is hidden in compartments beneath the fish hold, disguised as engine parts and navigational gear. At 4 a.m., the trawler departs Haitian waters and sets a course northwest, directly toward Cuba. By dawn, the tropical storm is intensifying. Waves are cresting at 12 feet. Rain lashes the trawler's deck in sheets. The CIA team members, most of whom have never worked a maritime operation, are violently seasick. But the storm is their ally. At 5:30 a.m. they're 8 miles off the Cuban coast, technically in international waters but well within visual range of Cuban patrol boats. If anyone were foolish enough to be patrolling in this weather. They're not. Cuban coastal defenses, designed to repel a Bay of Pigs-style invasion, are manned by soldiers who've learned that the revolution's rhetoric doesn't keep you dry. In weather like this, guard posts become shelters. Patrol schedules become suggestions. And the radar operators monitoring San Antonio airfield's perimeter are focused on not spilling coffee on their equipment. At 5:45 a.m., Mateo and 2 operatives are rowed ashore in an inflatable boat. They land on a beach 3 kilometers west of the airfield, in an area the CIA knows from signals intelligence is a blind spot in the coastal surveillance network. They bury the boat in the sand and begin moving inland, navigating by compass through pre-dawn darkness. Meanwhile, at exactly 5:47 a.m., something extraordinary happens at San Antonio Air Defense Station. The radar screens go dark. What the Cuban operators don't know, what won't be declassified until 1998, is that a U.S. Navy submarine, the USS Razorback, has surfaced 40 miles north of Cuba and activated a highly experimental electronic warfare system. For exactly 12 minutes, it broadcasts a precisely calibrated interference signal that blinds Soviet-made P-12 early warning radars across western Cuba. The signal is sophisticated enough that it doesn't trigger alarm systems. Instead, it mimics the electromagnetic signature of a severe lightning storm, something that happens naturally in the Caribbean several times a year. The Cuban operators, seeing what looks like weather interference, note it in their logs and wait for the static to clear. Those 12 minutes are the operation's entire window. Mateo and the team reached the airfield's southern perimeter at 5:51 a.m. The fence is exactly where the reconnaissance photos showed it. A chain-link barrier topped with razor wire, patrolled by guards whose shift change, according to Mateo's intelligence, begins in 4 minutes. They cut through the fence with hydraulic shears and slip into the airfield proper. The MiG-21 hangar is 400 meters away, across an open tarmac area. There's no concealment, no clever route. They simply have to cross it and hope the combination of darkness, rain, and bureaucratic complacency keeps them invisible. At 5:55 a.m., they reach the hangar's side entrance. Mateo produces a key, a perfect copy manufactured from a wax impression he smuggled out during his Mexico City meeting. His hands are shaking so badly that it takes 3 attempts to unlock the door. Inside, the MiG-21 sits like a sleeping predator. Even in the dim emergency lighting, it's beautiful, all swept wings and predatory angles, the hammer and sickle insignia bright on the tail. Serial number 4625. The jet that's been shooting down American pilots over Hanoi. They have 11 minutes before the radar comes back online. The 2 contract technicians move with practiced efficiency. They've rehearsed this disassembly sequence 40 times in a mock-up hangar in Virginia, working from stolen Soviet technical manuals. They know which panels to remove, which systems to prioritize, how to disconnect the targeting computer without triggering the anti-tamper charges Soviet engineers built into the electronics. Screwdrivers and socket wrenches blur in motion. Panels come off. Wiring harnesses are carefully disconnected and labeled. The RP-21M fire control radar, the crown jewel of Soviet avionics, is extracted from the nose cone and placed in a padded crate. At 5:58 a.m., one of the operatives freezes. Footsteps outside. A guard making his rounds despite the storm. Everyone stops breathing. The footsteps pause at the main entrance, 15 meters from where they're working. There's the scrape of a key in a lock, then muttered cursing in Spanish. The guard is trying to get out of the rain. The lock jams. More cursing. Then the footsteps recede. They have 3 minutes left. At 6:01 a.m., the radar screens come back online. The Cuban operators run diagnostics, find no anomalies and return to their coffee. Inside the hangar, the team has extracted 6 critical components. The radar system, the fire control computer, 2 weapon guidance modules, the engine's variable geometry inlet assembly, and, almost as an afterthought, the ejection seats data recorder, which will later reveal detailed flight parameters from every mission the jet has flown. The MiG-21 itself still looks intact from a distance. But anyone who actually inspects it will realize immediately that it's been gutted. A shell without a brain, a predator with its teeth removed. They load the crates onto a small utility cart that Mateo borrowed from the maintenance depot. The rain is slackening and the sky is beginning to lighten. They're running out of darkness. The return journey across the tarmac is the longest 400 meters of their lives. Halfway across, hangar lights come on across the airfield. The base is waking up. In 20 minutes, the first maintenance crews will arrive. They reach the perimeter fence at 6:14 a.m. At 6:23 a.m., they're back at the beach, loading the crates into the inflatable boat for the return trip to the trawler. At 6:35 a.m., the crates are secured in the trawler's hold, and the boat is moving south into international waters. At 8:47 a.m., a Cuban maintenance officer enters Hangar 7 at San Antonio Airfield and discovers that the MiG-21's access panels are hanging open. The alarm is raised at 8:52 a.m. What follows is chaos. Cuban military police descend on San Antonio Airfield. The hangar is sealed. Soviet advisors are summoned from Havana. The base commander is placed under arrest pending investigation. Every person who had access to the hangar in the past 48 hours is detained and interrogated. But here's what doesn't happen. Cuban patrol boats don't sweep the coastline. Air Force jets don't scramble to search for unauthorized aircraft. The Navy doesn't establish a blockade. Because Havana doesn't think the MiG has been stolen. The psychology of the operation is brilliant. The aircraft shell is still there. The hangar wasn't breached by force. There's no sign of foreign infiltration. What they see looks exactly like what the CIA wants them to see. Sabotage by Cuban personnel. Castro's paranoia works in the operation's favor. He spent a decade purging counter-revolutionaries from his military. The idea that traitors within his own ranks would sabotage Soviet equipment to embarrass him, that's not just plausible, it's expected. The investigation focuses inward, not outward. Meanwhile, at 2 p.m., the fishing trawler docks at a supposedly private marina in the Turks and Caicos Islands, a British territory, but one where the CIA has cultivated relationships with port officials who understand the value of selective blindness. The crates are transferred to a waiting C-130, the same one that began this operation. Within 3 hours they're airborne heading northwest toward Florida. At 11 p.m. on August 14, 38 hours after the operation began, the crates arrive at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. The MiG-21 secrets are about to be laid bare. In Moscow, the news from Cuba arrives like a thunderclap. The KGB's first chief directorate, responsible for foreign intelligence, immediately suspects American involvement. But they have no proof. The Cubans swear no foreign operatives were detected. There's no radar track of unauthorized aircraft. No signals intelligence indicating CIA communications. The evidence points to internal sabotage, but the Soviets can't publicly admit that possibility without acknowledging that Cuba's security is compromised, which would undermine the entire strategic relationship. So they do what Cold War powers always do: they bluster and investigate privately. A team of Soviet aerospace engineers arrives in Havana to assess the damage. Their confidential report, partially declassified in 1992, is damning. The removed components represent years of research and development. If they have fallen into American hands, the MiG-21's technological advantage over NATO aircraft is effectively neutralized. Several Cuban Air Force officers disappeared during the investigation. Whether they were executed, imprisoned, or simply reassigned to remote posts is unknown. Mateo's name never appears in any of the interrogation records, because officially he vanished weeks before the sabotage occurred, his absence attributed to defection. But Castro knows. He may not have proof, but he knows the Americans were involved. And it gnaws at him. The MiG-21 shell is eventually removed from the hangar and placed in storage. Years later it will be quietly scrapped, its parts cannibalized for other aircraft. The serial number 4625 is stricken from all official records. As if the jet never existed. At CIA headquarters, there's no champagne celebration. No commendations that will appear in personnel files. No press releases. The 7 members of the Eagle Feather team receive sealed letters of appreciation from the director, which are immediately classified and locked away. Their names don't appear in any operational summary. In the official budget records, the entire operation is buried under research and development, Caribbean theater, miscellaneous expenses. But in the classified briefing rooms where America's air war strategy is being rewritten, the impact is revolutionary. Over the following months, teams at Wright-Patterson and the Navy's China Lake facility disassemble and reverse engineer every component extracted from Cuba. They discover the RP-21M radar operates on frequencies NATO jammers weren't designed to counter. The K-13 missile guidance system has a vulnerability to chaff deployment at specific angles. The engine's performance envelope has a critical weakness at high altitude turns. The fire control computer has a 0.8-second processing lag that can be exploited. This intelligence directly informs the development of new tactics for F-4 Phantom pilots in Vietnam. American jamming pods are recalibrated. Air-to-air combat doctrine is revised. Pilots are taught to exploit the MiG-21's weaknesses rather than fear its strengths. By 1970, the kill ratio in air combat over Vietnam begins to shift in America's favor. Not because American aircraft suddenly became superior, but because the Americans finally understood what they were fighting. An Air Force analysis, declassified in 2003, estimates that intelligence from Eagle Feather contributed to saving between 40 and 60 American aircraft and their crews over the course of the Vietnam War. But there's no monument to the operation, no documentary films, no presidential commendation, just a note in a classified database, and a few aging components in a locked hangar at Wright-Patterson, labeled with a designation that means nothing to anyone without security clearance. Mateo never makes it to Florida. According to the operational timeline, he was supposed to board the trawler with the rest of the team after the components were secured. But in the chaos of the exfiltration, the deteriorating weather, the narrow timeline, the possibility of pursuit, the decision is made to split the team. Mateo volunteers to remain on the Cuban side of the Windward Passage, in case the operation requires a last-minute abort or additional intelligence. It's a questionable call made by people under enormous stress. The trawler departs without him. The plan is for a separate extraction. A small boat will pick him up from a prearranged coastal point 3 days later. But when the boat arrives at the coordinates on August 17th, there's no one waiting. The CIA runs signals intercepts for weeks, looking for any indication of his capture or interrogation. Nothing. They reach out to exile community contacts in Cuba. Nothing. They monitor Cuban state media for announcements of captured spies. Nothing. Mateo simply ceases to exist. The two most likely explanations are never confirmed. One possibility is that he was caught during the 72-hour gap between the operation and the planned extraction. Interrogated, executed, and buried in an unmarked grave, his involvement never publicized to avoid admitting the security breach. The other possibility is darker, that he drowned trying to reach the extraction point, his body claimed by the Caribbean, his family never knowing what became of him. Ricardo, the case officer who recruited him, writes in a classified after-action report. Subject proved reliable and courageous beyond expectation. His loss represents both an operational setback and a moral debt this agency cannot repay. The $50,000 promised to Mateo is eventually placed in a trust fund administered by the CIA's Office of General Counsel, legally designated for beneficiaries to be determined. As of the fund's last audit in 2019, it has never been claimed. In 1998, the CIA's Historical Review Panel declassifies portions of Eagle Feather's operational summary. The documents are heavily redacted, names blacked out, dates obscured, technical details removed. But the basic outline is there. A Cold War intelligence operation involving the acquisition of Soviet military technology from Cuba in 1968. Researchers and journalists piece together the story from fragments, aviation records, defector interviews, correlations with known air defense gaps. The full picture emerges slowly, incompletely. In 2004, a retired Air Force colonel publishes a memoir in which he mentions, almost in passing, examining components from a MiG-21 of uncertain provenance at Wright-Patterson in late 1968. He describes the excitement among the engineering teams, the long nights of reverse engineering, the gradual realization that they were holding the Soviet Union's aerospace secrets in their hands. In 2011, a Freedom of Information Act request turns up a single photograph. A large metal crate, stamped with medical equipment, Port au Prince General, sitting in a warehouse at an unnamed U.S. military facility. The date on the shipping label is August 15, 1968. The crate is open in the photograph. Inside, clearly visible, is the nose cone assembly of a Soviet fighter jet. Today, in a climate-controlled hangar at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, several components of a MiG-21 remain in storage. The official inventory lists them as reference materials, historical significance. Engineers occasionally request access for comparative studies. Historians studying Cold War technology submit proposals to examine them. Most requests are denied. Because even now, more than 5 decades later, some aspects of Eagle Feather remain classified. The names of the operatives who crossed the Cuban beach that storm-lashed August morning, still redacted. The technical specifications of the electronic warfare system that blinded Cuban radar, still classified. The full details of Mateo's recruitment and his ultimate fate, still sealed. What remains is the operation itself, a testament to the audacity and moral complexity of Cold War espionage. A reminder that history's turning points often happen in silence, executed by people whose names we'll never know, for reasons more complicated than simple patriotism. The MiG-21 components sit in their locked hangar, witnesses to an impossible heist. And somewhere in the Caribbean, possibly in an unmarked grave, possibly beneath 40 fathoms of blue water, lies the man who made it all possible. His name is redacted. But his sacrifice changed the course of the Cold War. And that, ultimately, is the only memorial that matters.